There is a very realistic possibility that next year they decide to hire an actual offensive coordinator, and just like Doug, Peterson being able to show Trevor Lawrence what some stable coaching looks like. There's a world where Mac Jones kind of gets back to where we're used to, but there's a lot of shaky pieces right now.
You know what's not shaky? Brock Purdy mania over there in San Francisco, Evan. Nothing shaky about what's going on with Brock. The Iowa connection, who would have ever thought? Not in my dreams, wildest dreams, did I ever think a Hawkeye and a Cyclone would become the best of friends. Yeah. And yet, the Cy-Hawk connection is just flourishing in San Francisco. George Kittle and Brock Purdy, yards after the catch, a tradition unlike any other. No one's tackling him. No one's stopping him. You never know which way Brock's looking. You never know which way he's going to throw the football. Everything coming up Niners. It's unbelievable to watch what's going on in San Francisco right now, Evan.
It's insane. And, I can't stress it enough. It's so much more insane than we're talking and, discussing it being. But we're all saying out loud, this is insane. I can't stress enough. As a 49ers fan, you're like, okay, hopefully he can just do enough. And then he comes in and he does more than enough. You're like, well, that in itself, that's pretty strange, but we're not going to complain. And then he comes in and he starts having really good mobility and he moves super well in the pocket. And you're like, rookies don't do that, but we're not going to complain. Let's all just be quiet and hope that it doesn't burn down. And then all of a sudden he starts hitting George Kittle and you're like, well, George Kittle hasn't really been useful in this offense all season. And we all just thought that was Kyle's fault. And as a Jimmy supporter, I'm like, hey, man, Jimmy didn't do that. So then we're like, okay, well, this makes no sense at all, but let's all be quiet because let's not, we don't want to jinx it. And then George Kittle starts just catching touchdown after touchdown after touchdown, and the offense is flowing, and you're like looking around for Ashton Kutcher. You're like, am I being punked? It doesn't make sense, and we're all terrified because it's like, is this a house of cards? Is this going to come crumbling down? I don't want to say anything. I don't want to make any adjustments because we're too close to the Super Bowl now, and it's just it's so great to watch it happen. And I talked to you about I remember when I was on the mountain and I bumped into Sage Rosenfeld, who coached him and trained him, and obviously played under Kyle. And he goes, I'm telling you, man, I don't know, but I think a lot of people are going to be very surprised by how good Brock Purdy is. And I was like, sure, man.
That's your guy. You got to go to bat for him.
Right. Yeah. But that's what I was thinking. You trained him. I'm sure he's got a great, hardest worker in the room. And then I watched this guy for 2 games, and I'm like, holy shit. I don't know what to, I wish I had more words, and I don't want to ramble, but I see the 49ers as in a place right now where they have the best defense in the NFL. It's not even close. If you look at the overall DVOA numbers, they have 36% DVOA, and the closest to them is 26%. They're firing on all cylinders in ways that I have never seen any team other than maybe the Chiefs under their Super Bowl run with Patrick Mahomes, and they didn't even have a good defense. I don't want to jinx it, but there's not a better team in the NFL right now than the 49ers, and I don't think that it's close. Every major marquee playoff contending team has taken bad losses or had the Cowboys have had 30 points scored on every single game they've won the last 3 games against bad teams. And so I'm sitting here as a 49ers fan, and I'm looking at everything falling into place, and I'm like, it's too good to be true. This can't be happening. I can't take another Super Bowl loss. I can't do it. I can't do it again. I can't have my hopes raised, but that's where we're at as 49ers fans. We're now at Super Bowl or bust territory. Nothing but a Super Bowl win would be good enough.
What do you think, Doug? Do you agree with this sentiment?
I think that the Brock Purdy thing has definitely been interesting because not to bring this back to the Patriots, but when the Patriots had Bailey Zappi at quarterback for 3 weeks, I had asked a bunch of people around the league, like, what do you think about, Bailey Zappi? Is this sustainable? All these different things. And you can even talk about like Mike White as well, some of these other quarterbacks. Like at some point, teams figure it out. And like it usually takes 2 or 3 weeks for a new quarterback, if he's having success, to come back down to earth. For Brock Purdy, what is it now? Like 4 weeks that he's been riding high and playing well. Like it's 3 weeks as a starter, and then plus he played a bunch of snaps in the game against Miami as well. So like I feel like we're almost past that point where a defense would usually figure out the new quarterback who's having success. And if anything, I feel like Purdy's actually playing better as his starts have gone along. So I still think that there's some cautious optimism about the way that he's playing. I think that there have maybe been times when like there's a few balls that should have been turnovers and whatever it is. But one thing that's surprising to me is that I don't think that the 49ers are really doing anything that different schematically with Brock Purdy than they were with Jimmy Garoppolo.
They're doing more.
As far as like, they're like, they haven't changed their downfield passing that much. They haven't changed their play action. They haven't changed, the screens. They haven't changed. Like the pressure's been about the same. The situations have been very similar for Jimmy Garoppolo and Brock Purdy. And obviously, the offense is firing on all cylinders right now. They're playing better with Brock Purdy. And I feel like maybe this is more damning to Jimmy Garoppolo than it is anything else. That like, I think that Jimmy Garoppolo was a pretty average quarterback. And maybe that's what Brock Purdy is as a rookie right now as well. And that you didn't need that there wasn't going to be a massive drop off between Jimmy Garoppolo and the next guy. And, in the past there has been with CJ Beathard and some of the other 49ers quarterbacks who have come in, but even those guys have had some success early on. Right. So I think it's also a testament to how good of a coach Kyle Shanahan is, that the system can keep running, whether it's Jimmy Garoppolo or Brock Purdy back there.
The one thing, there's to your points, a lot of the discussion, rightfully so, has been Brock Purdy. It's been Kyle Shanahan, the offense. It's been the skill position players. I don't know if there was anyone less confident in the Brian Griese hire at the beginning of the season than me. I mean, not to be a traditionalist, but I'm sitting in there like, you're hiring a coach that has zero coaching experience. Right. I'm not a scientist, and I certainly didn't graduate college, but the math doesn't work for me there. And I've talked to some of the beat writers myself, and I'm like, hey, why aren't we asking these questions more? And they have at times, but I'm a big common denominator and variable person. What are the variables? What are the changes? What's the same? And there's a lot of common denominators. There's a lot of things that have stayed the same throughout this process. But one of the biggest changes has been getting rid of Rich Scangarello, who was pretty much across the board considered a bad coach, all things considered. He went to college. No one knew why someone would go to college after an NFL job. And,
he got fired after a year.
He got fired after a year. Right. So they bring in Brian Griese. And is that just because it's going from negative to even just a net positive? Who knows? But now, like you mentioned with Jimmy has had his best season this year that I've ever seen him.